Tommy Halden was silent, Fraser was ruthless, and Mehmet was the shadow between them. Together, they built the UK's most feared drug empire, but only one would survive to watch it burn. Tommy Halden was born in the grey, crumbling housing estates of East Manchester, where opportunity came in two forms: violence or crime. He chose both. From a young age, he earned his nickname, Brick, not for building anything, but because nothing could break him. Fights in school, arrests as a teenager, even a stabbing at 16. Tommy survived them all without flinching. He had the kind of presence that made grown men pause. Not because he was loud or wild, but because he was silent and unshakable. That silence would one day make him feared across the country. By the time he was 17, Tommy had already become a regular fixture among local gangs, running stolen phones and dealing small amounts of weed outside nightclubs. But unlike other street kids who wasted their earnings on trainers and flashy watches, Tommy saved. He watched. He learned. He knew that drug empires weren't built on chaos. They were built on structure, loyalty, and fear. He didn't want to be a foot soldier. He wanted to own the war. His first big move came at 19. A rival gang had been flooding the area with cut cocaine, angering local dealers. Tommy used the opportunity to step in quietly, offering a higher, quality product smuggled in through a contact in Liverpool. That contact, a warehouse manager with gambling debts, gave Tommy access to packages before customs ever knew they existed. He started small, just a few ounces, sold only to people he trusted. But in the drug game, consistency spreads faster than violence. Tommy brought in two people he could control: his younger cousin Liam Halden, and Fraser, a former inmate known for his brutal reputation. Liam was loyal but reckless, always chasing Tommy's approval. Fraser was dangerous, but disciplined, exactly what Tommy needed. Together, they formed the core of what would soon become the most feared drug gang in the north of England. The early days were quiet. Tommy avoided attention. He kept his crew small. They didn't flash money. They didn't party. While other gangs posted photos on social media, Brick's crew stayed in the shadows. Their supply line was reliable, their product pure, and their delivery method precise. Money flowed in faster than they could count, but Tommy still lived in the same semi-detached house his mother once rented. No luxury cars. No girlfriends posting selfies in penthouses. Just business. By his 23rd birthday, Tommy's name was whispered in corners. He had taken over territory once controlled by older, violent crews without firing a single shot. When police raided known hotspots, they found nothing. Brick didn't use known stash houses or trap flats. He used storage units under fake names, motorcycle couriers with clean records, and old pay-as-you-go phones changed weekly. His system was almost untraceable. As profits grew, so did his reach. Smaller gangs either aligned with him or vanished. Dealers who once ignored his offers started coming to him for supply. Even users began asking for Brick gear, knowing it meant higher purity. The Halden crew expanded into neighboring cities, pushing out competitors not with brute force, but with silent efficiency. But success has a cost. While Tommy worked to keep things clean, others in the crew started getting bolder. Fraser began recruiting his own men. Liam, desperate to prove himself, started making deals without Brick's approval. The cracks were small, but they were there. Tommy, however, remained focused. He had no time for ego. Every decision was calculated. Every risk was measured. He didn't care about being the biggest gang. He cared about being the last one standing. What no one knew was that while Tommy rose in the shadows, someone much larger had already started watching. And the game he thought he controlled was about to turn into something far more dangerous. While Tommy Halden's drug empire continued to grow quietly across Manchester, it had begun making waves beyond the city. Waves that reached the eyes of dangerous people in London. The Turkish cartel, led by Aziz Bayrak, had controlled heroin distribution across parts of the UK for over a decade. They operated with precision, using ports in Essex and Kent to move product through legitimate shipping companies, all under fake manifests. For years, their operation had run smoothly, with local gangs paying for supply and staying in line. But then, profits dropped, and reports came in that Manchester's demand had shifted. Aziz Bayrak didn't like surprises. When his lieutenants investigated, they uncovered a name that had been repeated more often than any other: Brick. They learned that Tommy Halden's crew wasn't just growing. It was overtaking territories, replacing long-time cartel clients with their own streamlined operation. To the cartel, it wasn't just business loss. It was disrespect. Aziz sent one of his most trusted operatives, Mehmet, to Manchester with a clear mission: find out who Brick really was, how deep his network ran, and whether he could be used, or needed to be removed. Mehmet was a specialist in infiltration. He didn't show up with armed men or threats. Instead, he arrived looking like an ordinary wholesaler, with a small team, a fake backstory, and connections to high-purity heroin that were hard to resist. At first, no one suspected a thing. Mehmet presented himself as a low-level supplier with connections in Europe. He offered free samples, prices too good to ignore, and absolute discretion. He didn't approach Tommy directly. Instead, he found Fraser Cole. Fraser had grown restless under Tommy's strict leadership. He saw how much money flowed in and out, but never understood why they weren't expanding faster. Fraser wanted to take more risks, bring in more product, and make their presence known. So when Mehmet offered Fraser access to high-purity heroin at a fraction of street cost, Fraser made a decision that would change everything. He went behind Brick's back. Using his own side crew, Fraser began distributing Mehmet's heroin under a fake brand name, White Tower. He used local dealers who didn't even know they were working for the Halden network. Within months, White Tower heroin flooded the streets of Manchester and spilled into neighboring towns. The product was clean, the price unbeatable, and it was everywhere. Fraser was careful at first. He paid off a few local officers, used burner phones, and avoided known Halden delivery routes. But success made him greedy. He expanded faster than he could manage. New dealers brought new problems: robberies, overdoses, and violence. Unlike Brick's careful, quiet model, Fraser's network grew loud. Soon, fights broke out between Halden-affiliated dealers and those pushing White Tower heroin. Tommy started getting calls about customers being robbed, stashes missing, and strange new suppliers pushing on their turf. Liam Halden grew suspicious and brought it up with Tommy, who initially dismissed it. He believed Fraser was too loyal to betray him. But then, during a routine delivery, one of their couriers was stabbed outside Rochdale. The stolen package had been replaced with White Tower product. Tommy began to see the pattern. His own network was being hollowed out from the inside. He checked stash locations and found inconsistencies. Someone had access to information that should have been protected. Someone close was working with the enemy. Meanwhile, Mehmet continued feeding Fraser more product, more weapons, and more confidence. Aziz Bayrak knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just selling heroin. He was destabilizing the UK's fastest-growing independent gang, turning it against itself from within. His hope was simple. Either Fraser would take over and fall in line, or the Halden crew would collapse entirely, clearing the way for cartel control. What no one knew was that Tommy had already started tracing the leaks. He was quiet, methodical, and angry. And when Tommy Halden got angry, people disappeared. While Tommy Halden's influence spread across Manchester's underworld, his quiet success drew attention from much larger forces operating in the shadows. In London, a long-established Turkish cartel led by Aziz Bayrak had been controlling the flow of heroin into the UK for over 15 years. Their network stretched from the ports of Istanbul to the streets of Birmingham and beyond, using shipping containers, customs loopholes, and corrupt officials to move product across borders. They prided themselves on control, predictability, and profit. But something had changed. Reports from their northern buyers revealed a sharp drop in orders. Old clients were disappearing or refusing to pay. Street dealers claimed a new player was taking over, offering better product, faster delivery, and no middlemen. The name that kept surfacing was Brick. Aziz didn't like hearing about unknown names. To him, unknown meant uncontrolled. He believed in sending a message before a problem became a threat. Rather than use violence, Aziz sent Mehmet Aksu, a man who operated like a shadow. Mehmet had no criminal record, no known links to the cartel, and a spotless identity under a fake import-export business. He was an expert in infiltration, someone who gained power by giving others what they wanted before taking everything away. His assignment was simple: enter Manchester, earn trust, get close to Brick's operation, and find its weaknesses. Mehmet arrived posing as a Turkish businessman with European supply lines and discreet connections to high-purity heroin. He set up shop quietly, making himself known among the small-time dealers on the edge of the Halden crew's influence. He didn't try to force his way in. He waited. It wasn't long before one of his samples reached Fraser Cole. Fraser had grown tired of playing second to Tommy. While Tommy ran things with discipline and caution, Fraser wanted more. He wanted expansion, respect, and a legacy of his own. Mehmet's offer came at the perfect time. He provided heroin at purity levels the streets hadn't seen in years, and at a price that undercut nearly every existing supplier. Fraser didn't tell Tommy. Instead, he built his own small network, separate from the official Halden operation. He picked his own runners, used unknown stash houses, and moved product under a new name, White Tower. At first, it was small, just a test, but when the money started rolling in faster than expected, Fraser couldn't stop. He reinvested, hired muscle, and began operating like a king without a crown. Mehmet watched from a distance, feeding him more product and offering advice disguised as casual business suggestions. He encouraged Fraser to be bold. He knew the faster Fraser moved, the more chaos he would create inside the Halden crew. Chaos was exactly what the cartel wanted. Tommy began to notice subtle signs. Orders weren't being fulfilled on time. Trusted dealers were acting differently. New faces showed up in areas that had long been under his control. And worst of all, the product flooding the streets didn't come from his supply line. Liam Halden, ever loyal, flagged the pattern early. He warned Tommy that someone close might be leaking routes or stock information. But Tommy didn't act immediately. He wanted proof. He started pulling records, shifting deliveries, and watching who responded. What he found was unsettling. Fraser's side operation was bigger than anyone expected. It had its own stash houses, its own dealers, and more disturbingly, its own reputation. People were now asking for White Tower gear by name, thinking it was part of the Halden supply. Tommy realized the streets were being taken from under him, and not by a rival gang, but from within his own trusted circle. He didn't know yet that Mehmet Aksu had orchestrated every move, nor that the cartel planned to sweep in once the Halden crew fractured. But what Tommy did know was enough. Someone had betrayed him, and the war wouldn't be loud, it would be personal. Tommy Halden had vanished. After the ambush at the Salford safe house, where police kicked down doors and a young lookout was found shot, the Halden crew collapsed into chaos. Fraser Cole took full control, assuming Brick was either dead or on the run for good. With Liam isolated and too shaken to challenge authority, Fraser stepped into the spotlight. He partnered openly with Mehmet Aksu, using cartel supplies to flood Manchester, Liverpool, and parts of Birmingham with heroin, meth, and firearms. Under his leadership, the gang lost its subtlety. Flashy cars returned. Nightclubs were used as meeting points. Money flowed quickly, but so did blood. What Fraser didn't know was that Tommy wasn't hiding, he was planning. During those silent months, Tommy built something different. No more street-level dealers. No more wide, open networks. He contacted former soldiers he had met during his brief time in prison, men with quiet pasts and violent skills. He recruited Callum Ricks, a hacker with a history of shutting down bank servers for sport. Tommy's new crew was smaller, smarter, and invisible. They weren't in it for the money. They were in it for control and revenge. Tommy didn't want his old empire back. He wanted the ones who took it from him to feel every ounce of betrayal he had endured. His new strategy was surgical. He began by cutting Fraser's power slowly, starting with his supply routes. A truckload of heroin vanished near Leeds. A warehouse in Stockport caught fire, destroying more than £500,000 in product. No one could trace it. Police had no leads. Fraser blamed local rivals, then corrupt drivers, but nothing added up. Next, Fraser's dealers started disappearing. At first, it looked like arrests. Then one body turned up in a canal, hands zip tied behind his back. Another was found dumped in an alley in Birmingham. No messages, no signs, just silence. Mehmet grew uneasy. He urged Fraser to pull back, to stop expanding until they knew what was happening. But Fraser, blinded by success, refused to slow down. He believed he could crush whatever resistance remained. He had numbers, weapons, and connections. What he lacked was caution. Meanwhile, Callum Ricks did more damage from behind a screen than most gangs could with 100 guns. He hacked into police radio networks, listened in on encrypted cartel communications, and used malware to track Mehmet's movements without ever leaving a room. He drained small accounts Fraser had hidden, rerouted shipments, and created digital footprints that led authorities to the wrong places at the right time. It wasn't just warfare. It was sabotage disguised as coincidence. Fraser's empire began to shrink. Trusted men started questioning orders. One lieutenant disappeared after a meeting. Another overdosed mysteriously on his own supply. Mehmet finally realized the truth. Brick was alive, and he was coming for them. In desperation, Fraser made a move that would cross a line even among criminals. He kidnapped Halden. He believed Liam was Tommy's weakness, the one family member he had left. If Tommy saw Liam in pain, maybe he'd show himself. Maybe the war could end with one clean bullet. But Fraser underestimated what Tommy had become. He wasn't a grieving cousin anymore. He was a machine, and Liam's capture didn't slow him. It pushed him over the edge. Tommy located the building where Liam was being held using an anonymous tip, a GPS glitch planted by Callum, and a drone hidden in a package delivered 2 days earlier. He didn't call the police. He didn't bring an army. He brought 4 men with him, silent, masked, and deadly. The night of the rescue left no trace for law enforcement. Cameras failed. Alarms didn't ring. But the next morning, Liam was found alone, walking barefoot down an empty road, covered in blood that wasn't his. Something had changed in him. He didn't speak for days. The message was clear. Tommy was back. And now the war was no longer about drugs. It was personal. Liam Halden's return sent a chill through Manchester's underworld. When he was found wandering alone, bloodied and silent, the rumor mill exploded. Some said Fraser Cole had been killed. Others claimed Tommy Halden had returned from the dead. In reality, Fraser was still alive. But that wouldn't last long. Something had shifted. Dealers refused to meet in public. Suppliers grew cautious. Fraser's name, once respected and feared, became a warning sign. No one wanted to be too close when the storm finally hit. Fraser knew he was running out of time. His operations were crumbling. White Tower heroin had disappeared from most street corners, replaced by nothing. Stash houses were compromised, product went missing, and police raids increased in frequency and precision. Even Mehmet Aksu had started distancing himself, speaking less, changing phones more often, and avoiding any mention of Brick. The Turkish cartel was growing impatient. They wanted results, not excuses. And Fraser, desperate to hold on to power, made the mistake of pushing back. Tommy Halden, meanwhile, was already orchestrating his final strike. His team operated like ghosts, with Callum Ricks in the background intercepting phone calls, emails, and every digital trace Fraser left behind. Tommy didn't just want to eliminate Fraser. He wanted to erase every part of the network that had betrayed him, starting from the top. That meant Mehmet, and eventually Aziz Bayrak himself. It began with Mehmet. He'd gone into hiding after receiving a direct threat in the form of a burned SIM card mailed to his hotel room in London. He changed locations, hired private security, and cut ties with nearly everyone. It didn't matter. One morning, his body was found floating in the Regent's Canal. His hands were tied behind his back, his mouth stuffed with a USB drive. Authorities extracted the data. It contained detailed evidence of Fraser's dealings with the cartel, complete with transaction logs, drop locations, and names of key players. Someone had built a case, packaged it neatly, and handed it to law enforcement without ever showing their face. The fallout was immediate. The cartel severed ties with Fraser, leaving him isolated and exposed. Police launched multiple raids across the country using the data found on Mehmet, but Fraser slipped through their grasp. He was no longer in charge of a drug empire. He was a fugitive hunted by the police, rival gangs, and whatever force Tommy Halden had become. Fraser tried to run. Using a fake passport, he booked a last-minute flight to Dubai from Heathrow. But Callum Ricks had already seen the booking. By the time Fraser reached the airport, 2 plainclothes officers were waiting. He was arrested on suspicion of multiple murders, conspiracy to distribute Class A substances, and financial fraud. His name hit the headlines within hours, labeled as the man who helped destroy Manchester's drug empire from within. As for Tommy, he disappeared again. No one saw him. No one heard from him. Some say he left the country using a new identity, vanishing into Eastern Europe. Others believe he was killed shortly after settling the score, buried somewhere in an unmarked grave as punishment from the cartel. But many believe he's still alive, watching quietly, ensuring no one ever rises from the ashes of the empire he once built. His story became legend in the criminal world. New dealers were told not to speak his name. Gang leaders used his methods: tight control, no flash, total silence. In the end, Tommy Halden didn't just run the toughest drug gang the UK had ever seen. He dismantled it, piece by piece, on his own terms. Not for profit, not for power, but for vengeance, for control, and for the silence that made him untouchable.